Before tonight's horrors unfold, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. Your support keeps the horrors alive. Let's begin. Halloween was always my favorite holiday. Sure, it didn't have the presence of Christmas, and I didn't get to see family like on Thanksgiving, but there was just something about it that appealed to me on a deeper, more fundamental level. The costumes, the candy, the whole celebration of the macabre and the grotesque, it all just felt like magic when I was growing up. A big part of my enjoyment stemmed from trick-or-treating. My family would always help me put a lot of effort into my costumes, as we all knew that the better the costume, the more candy you'd get. I remember one year spending nearly an hour letting my mother attach prosthetic warts and smear green makeup over my face to help transform me into a classic fairy tale witch. And by the end of the night, my pillow casing was almost full to bursting with candy. I thought it would last me nearly a month, but of course, it was less than a week before I'd guzzled down my entire stash. As I grew older, trick-or-treating lost a little bit of its shine, if only because adults seemed to be looking me over whenever I'd approach their house, as if silently asking, "Aren't you a little bit old for this, Evelyn?" Eventually, I began to take joy in going to Halloween parties instead, and all the ups and downs that came with such teenage merrymaking. I still missed trick-or-treating, though, even through to my 20s, when I finally got a job steady enough to let me move out of my childhood bedroom and into an apartment of my own, in a city far, far away from the neighborhood I had grown to love. It wasn't just the kids that got a chance to dress up, I realized. Every pumpkin on the front porch, every fake cobweb, every plastic skeleton was a costume in of itself. A costume for the house that bore it. Trick-or-treating wasn't just about the candy, it was a chance to see your neighbors express themselves and put on a show for one night of the year. The neighborhood I grew up in took Halloween pretty seriously, and I was blessed with a lot of happy memories of nights filled with laughter and the sweet taste of candy. But of all the many decorated houses I visited during those dozen or so Halloweens I got to enjoy in my youth, Mr. Joyce's stood out above all others. The way Mr. Joyce celebrated Halloween, you would have thought it was a national holiday. From the 1st of October till the 1st of November, his house was far and away the best decorated out of anyone's for miles around. There were no cheap foam tombstones with eye-roll-inducing puns, no rubber bats dangling from plainly visible strings. The house was transformed into a scene of horror and grotesquerie that surpassed anything I'd ever seen. There were about a dozen skeletons of various sizes, arranged into elaborate poses all over his front lawn, sometimes half buried in the earth as though emerging from beneath the ground. Multiple fog machines and a number of fake trees transformed his suburban lawn into the depths of a dark and forbidding forest. There was an old-style carnival wagon that I can only assume Mr. Joyce built himself, with a sign proclaiming it to be a cabinet of curiosities. Within were contained jars filled with eyeballs, entrails, loose teeth, even a fetus or two, all illuminated by a dim, flickering light. The bulb tinted red in a way that made the illumination it produced seem otherworldly and strange. There were motion-activated animatronics that would pop up and scare you on the way to the front door, hidden speakers playing eerie noises, and glowing red eyes hidden in dark corners that would blink evilly at you. I could go on and on about the macabre wonders of Mr. Joyce's Halloween decorations, but I could never hope to fully impress upon you the true extent of the effort he put into it. The best part was that no two Halloweens were ever quite the same with Mr. Joyce. Every year he would add some fresh terror just to spice things up. There was an ever-escalating increase in quality, a sense of tangible improvement year after year, and I was always eager to see what he did next. Even when I was too old to do trick-or-treating, I'd still try to stop by each year up until I moved away, just to see what he'd put up that year. I remember he'd always offer me a full-size candy bar, just like he did for all the children, despite my protestations that I was too old for that sort of thing and had just wanted to see the decorations. "You're never too old for Halloween, Evelyn," he'd always say with a wink, and I'd wind up taking the candy anyway. Whenever October rolled around, I found myself thinking more and more about my childhood memories and how much I missed my hometown. I tried to participate in some local events in the city I lived in, but it just wasn't the same. The magic wasn't there. After a few years of such disappointing attempts at revelry, I gave in and requested a week off at the end of October from my job and booked a flight back home. My mother and father greeted me with open arms, eager to see their only daughter after so many years spent away from home. As much as they had been happy to see me go off on my own, it was always apparent that they missed my company. We spent the first day back talking about how we'd been and what we'd been up to, catching each other up on all that had changed since we'd last spoken. I told them about my new girlfriend. My mother told me she joined a book club, and my father tried desperately to make his latest woodworking project seem in any way interesting to anyone other than himself. After much conversation and setting up my bags in the guest room, I expressed a desire to go on a bit of a walk to see the decorations people had put up this year. It was getting to be early evening, and I thought it would be best to do so before it got too dark. However, upon bringing up the topic of Halloween, it was as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. My father cleared his throat awkwardly and looked away as though searching for something else to talk about. My mother seemed to grow a little bit pale. I asked what was wrong, but both insisted it was nothing, and to enjoy my walk. I was a bit puzzled, but ultimately didn't press the issue. I had no desire to start an argument so soon after arriving at my childhood home, so I simply put on my coat and stepped out into the autumn chill. As I strolled through my old neighborhood, I began to realize what I probably should have noticed on the bus ride from the airport. There were hardly any Halloween decorations out at all. There wasn't a total lack. I still saw the occasional jack-o'-lantern here and there, or maybe a wooden cutout of a black cat, but that was it. Even these small nods to the holiday seemed tentative, almost apologetic with their mildness. It was nothing at all like the exuberant displays from my youth. I continued my walk, now turning into more of a march as I went faster and faster, trying to see more houses and hoping the drought of Halloween spirit would soon be replaced with the fervor I was used to. I wanted to see Mr. Joyce's house. If nothing else, I could be certain he, of all people, would make up for the other's lack of enthusiasm. And yet, when I finally did reach the house, which had so fascinated me for so many Halloweens previous, I was greeted with a sad, depressing sight. A chain-link fence blocked off the front lawn from public access, the entrance gate shut with a padlock. Beyond the barrier was a barren, abandoned-looking house, stripped bare of any ornamentation save some graffiti. I know it sounds silly, but I actually teared up a little, looking at the old place. It felt as though my childhood was finally, truly gone. I made my way back to my parents' house, dragging my feet compared to my earlier frustrated vigor. By the time I arrived, it was already dark. My mother and father were sitting in the living room, my mother reading while my father was watching some video or another on his laptop. I didn't hesitate to ask the question that had been bubbling up inside me the whole walk back. What happened to Mr. Joyce? For a moment, I thought they didn't hear me, as neither my mother nor my father responded for a good 30 seconds. My father didn't even look up from his laptop, while my mother just stared down at her book, eyes looking straight forward, not following the flow of the letters on the page. I was about to ask the question again when my father shut his computer and walked out of the room. I could see that his cheeks were flushed red with what looked like rage. "Evelyn," said my mother softly, "there's something I have to show you." She stood up, gesturing for me to follow her. She took me to her office, where she began rifling through some papers in her filing cabinet. After a minute or so, she found what she was looking for, an old newspaper clipping, and handed it to me. I kept it, just in case you wondered what happened. I knew I wouldn't have the heart to tell you myself. I know how much you... She trailed off. There was a tremulous quality to her voice. I looked down at the paper, my lips softly mumbling the words as I read the headline I almost refused to believe. Hidden in plain sight, Halloween killer behind bars. Below the headline was a mugshot of Mr. Joyce, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit. It was difficult to read the article in its entirety. My eyes seemed to just slide over the words like water on oilcloth. Certain phrases stuck out, though, sticking into my memory and burning there forever like napalm. Skeletal remains of victims displayed on front lawn. Organs found removed and preserved in formaldehyde. The evidence suggests over a dozen victims, though an exact number has not been confirmed at this time. The identities of most of the deceased have yet to be determined, but officials estimate the age range of the victims as being from 10 to 18 years old. Halloween was my favorite holiday. It used to hold a very special place in my heart, a place filled with warm, happy memories that I could look back on and smile. Now there's just a cold, icy void where that joy used to be, a black hole that I know will never be filled. How am I supposed to look back on pleasant evenings of fun and laughter, knowing now that I was inches away from such atrocities? How am I supposed to be grateful for my happy childhood, knowing I gladly took candy from the hands of a killer? I hate Mr. Joyce for what he did. I hate him for perverting what should have been an innocent, happy occasion and turning it into something horrible, when everyone else was gleefully putting on costumes for 1 month a year. He was able to take his off,